My name is Eugenia Chu. I'm an author here in Miami Beach, Florida. And I started writing, well, let me back up. I started writing stories for children after my son was born. So I've always been a bibliophile. I've always surrounded myself with books, love buying books, love reading books. And then when I got pregnant, I started buying children's books, buying all the classics, the ones that we grew up with. And then after my son was born, I started looking more and more for books that had a little bit of Chinese in them because I wanted to teach him Chinese and I wanted to reinforce what I was teaching him. And I wanted to give him to see himself in other books. And, you know, I couldn't find any. I was specifically looking for books that were written in English with just some Chinese language and culture intertwined into the stories. And I was sure there must be books out there like that, but I couldn't find any. So I started writing my own. So
and I know that you've talked about in other interviews how you were specifically looking for a certain kind of book. You weren't looking for one that was just like kind of a textbook to teach the ABCs, and you didn't want one that we see a lot of the bilingual books where one side is in English and the other side in Chinese. Why were you looking for this specific story, specific way of passing on some of the language and culture through story? Why was that so important to you?
Well, I wanted something that I'd be able to read, especially at bedtime, like a bedtime story. And I am not fluent. So it'd be really hard for me to read a full book in Chinese to my son, especially if I had to explain what everything meant in each word. And I think it might be a little bit frustrating for him too. So when he was very little, I tried to teach, I'd repeat everything, say something in English and say something in Chinese. But as the vocabulary and the language got a little bit more difficult, it was a lot more difficult for me as well. So I figured if a story in English, since he was learning to read and write in English as well, if I had a story in English that had some culture and language in it, it wouldn't be so overwhelming for him, and it'd be a little bit easier to read, and he won't feel like it was not a lesson. Like he's not going to school and learning Chinese. I wanted something fun.
Right, still a good bedtime story, right?
Right.
And why is it so important to you? I know you're first generation Chinese American. Why was that something that was so important to you that he learned some of the language and the culture?
Well, we're American, but we're also Chinese, and it's our heritage. And I feel that passing on the Chinese language and culture will help him, give him a sense of who he is, and help build a positive and healthy self-identity, and hopefully pride in being Chinese American. And also, I wanted him to be able to communicate with our relatives in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, because we still have relatives there. And it would be, also, I think it would be a lot easier to travel to those kind of countries where they speak mostly Chinese. And I'm sure you agree with this, but I feel like if you're familiar with the language and the culture when you visit a country, you have a different type of experience, a deeper experience.
Right.
Yeah, so...
And I think that you kind of brought up an element. I don't remember if this was one that I sent to you ahead of time, but something that really struck me when I was looking at your books is how you highlight I think something that a lot of kids are going through, where they do have families in different cultures and maybe in different countries. And I love that you bring that aspect out in the book, whether he's going to visit them or whether he has the grandma coming to visit here in the US. And I specifically looking at, I think it was your first book, right? The Brandon Makes, I'm going to say this wrong, Brandon Makes Jiǎo, the dumplings. So this is about him cooking dumplings with his grandmother who's visiting from China. Why did you choose to focus on that interaction between him and his grandmother and making dumplings together?
Well, when he was very little, before bedtime, we'd read a few stories, and then at lights out, we would talk about his day. He'd go through and list everything he did, and he would spend some time talking about things that he really loved and make little stories. And whenever my parents came to visit, Brandon always made jiǎo with my mom, his po, and that was his favorite thing. It became a tradition, and they still do it. So every time they'd come visit, you know, at nighttime when we talk about it, Brandon would just talk on and on about making jiǎo po, and you know, we'd make up little stories. So the story just it kind of wrote itself. A lot of it happens in real life, and it was the easy story. It's the first story I wrote just because it's something he adored so much, and it really touched me. The relationship is really sweet. It makes me really happy.
Yeah, and I love that. I love having that. It also talks a lot, like I said, about how passing on the heritage often is tied to our families. And
Yeah.
so he's having this real, like, wonderful kind of interaction with the Chinese culture through, and it's all tied to his love for his grandmother. It's so beautiful. And you also, as we mentioned, you also have 2 chapter books about him actually traveling to see his family, one to Beijing and one to Hong Kong. And how did you choose, what made you decide to choose those 2 cities to highlight?
Well, we actually brought Brandon to those 2 cities.
Oh,
so
awesome.
the first Asian city we ever went to was Beijing. And so a lot of the things that happened in this book, we met his cousins there. We went over our Thanksgiving break. And a lot of the things that happened, and all the places that we visited in the story and all the foods that we ate in the story happened in real life. And then to that, we just kind of added a little bit of a new character.
Nice.
So while we were there were a lot of panda pictures and posters and stuffed animals everywhere. And so all the kids loved pandas. And my son, and particularly his cousin Kayla, they were just enthralled. They were so in love with the pandas. And so I thought, oh, okay, we've got to have a panda character in this book. And we named it after Brandon's stuffed panda, Xiaoming. So that's how we came up with that. And then for Hong Kong, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, I love the how you incorporated the panda and how you incorporate like elements of his own life into the books. That's great.
Yeah, thanks. The same thing for Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, we went a couple years later. And again, all the places we went to and all the food is in the book. So of course, I also add a little bit of mystery and add a new character into that book. Dragon.
Yes.
And I have to thank my nephew, Sean. He came up with it because I was thinking, oh, what new character can I put in this book? And he came up with the dragon, and I let him name him Ian. So, family's involved.
Well, so what did they think about it? Like the cousins and Brandon especially. What does your son think about having these books that are really based on his life?
Well, when he was younger, I think he thought it was really cool, especially because I started writing when he was very young. And when I first started writing this book, Brandon Meets Jiǎo, I never, ever even thought about publishing it. It was just a story for him based on things that he loved. And when he was learning to read, that's when I started writing it out so he could practice reading as well.
Right.
And so that I think he loved it at the time. Now that he's a little bit older, I think he's a little bit embarrassed maybe. His friends will make comments and things like that. But I think he still appreciates it. And
I know you're probably not able to see the comments as they're scrolling past, but you have a comment about someone who loves all of your characters in your books.
That's so sweet. I'm happy.
And I do, we've been talking about your fiction books, but I do want to mention your nonfiction book, which is the Celebrating Chinese New Year, which is so wonderful. It includes the history, traditions, activities. Why Chinese New Year? And was it one of your favorite holidays growing up?
Well, Chinese New Year is the most celebrated Chinese holiday. It's the biggest holiday. And actually, it's only second to Christmas. That's how many people celebrate it. And it's the largest migration during the year. More people travel for Chinese New Year than any other time during the year. And so most people heard of Chinese New Year, but they don't really know that much about it. And it was my favorite. Well, Christmas was my favorite holiday. Chinese New Year is my second favorite holiday. But even when I was growing up, I grew up here. I was born and raised in the U.S. So I didn't know too much about Chinese New Year, except that, we got hongbao, which is the red envelopes full of money. So that was always fun.
Right.
And then we'd always have the big feast with all the yummy food. So that was always fun. But I didn't really know a lot of the other traditions and the legends behind it and the history behind it. So I thought, hey, this would be a great way to share this because more and more people want to learn about other holidays from other countries. And it was really well received. And people loved the format, especially teachers. I was surprised that this book was so popular.
Right. So, well, I was just thinking that with teachers, because like you said, a lot of them are trying to incorporate more of these holidays into their curriculum, but maybe they don't know that much about it specifically. So this is such a great resource, I think. And was it hard for you to research, or was that fun to find out these traditions?
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. A lot of the traditions I knew a little bit about as I was growing up. But yeah, it was fun to research it. And I was like, wow, a lot of facts. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know it was the biggest migration during the year. And I didn't know, so many people celebrated so many different countries and how different countries do different things. It was really fun to research. And I loved sharing it with people. I've spoken with some teachers who've used it for their class curriculum. And I'm like, wow, I was really flattered. And it was great. It was great.
Do you think that you would do another nonfiction book? I mean, what are you working on now?
Oh, funny that you asked, because just the other day I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to write a book about the next biggest Chinese holiday, which is the Autumn Moon Festival, Mid-Autumn Moon Festival. And this book, I'm going to format it the same way because its format was so well received. But this project I'm especially excited about because I'm going to be co-writing it with a friend. Her name is Chen, Irene Chen, and she's an author in Hong Kong. And she also teaches English. So I think it'll be really fun to work with somebody. So together we'll write the book, and using my original illustrator who did the chapter books, Eliza Chen. So it's going to be a really, really fun project working with all these wonderful women.
Yes. Do you have a projected date for when we can look for it?
Well, I was the writing part won't take too long, but my illustrator Eliza, she has so many projects going on right now. So we're hoping to maybe get it out by the end of the summer, but it may be next summer.
Okay.
In time for
the autumn, right?
Right.
You had mentioned the format. Can you show, for people who aren't familiar with the book, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what actually the format is?
Sure. So here's a table of contents. I don't know if you can see that, but it starts out with, it gives you a definition of what is Chinese New Year, and it talks about a little bit. So same thing for the Moon Festival, about what is the Mid-Autumn Moon Festival. Right. And then I'll talk about history and the folklore and some of the fun stories. So this one was about the Monster Nian in the Chinese New Year. And for Mid-Autumn Festival, it'll be about the Chang'e. I'm not going to give it away too much, but it's about the White Rabbit and the moon and the whole legend behind that. It's a really fun story as well. And then we'll talk about preparation, how to get ready for the Autumn Moon Festival. Here's how to get ready for Chinese New Year. It goes through you are what you eat. So of course I'll talk about food. All my books include some food in them.
Yes, I love it.
And then also there'll be a section on how to celebrate what people do. And then around the world. So I'll talk about how other countries celebrate it. And for the Autumn Moon Festival, there are similar holidays in other countries, and I'll talk about that as well. I'll go to the Culture Corner, which will have some fun games and recipes. So this one had Chinese dumplings. In the new book, we'll have mooncake recipe, of course.
Yes.
And some games and some crafts will be included as well. Some ideas for how people can celebrate. And then, a lot of how to say it. So a few things on how to say, like Happy New Year here. Another book will be how do you say Happy Mid-Autumn Moon Festival, and a glossary. So that's the layout of the book, and ends with some resources and things like that.
That's wonderful, especially because I feel like that one isn't known quite as much as Chinese. I mean, Chinese New Year is great because everybody's looking for resources on Chinese New Year, but Mid-Autumn Moon Festival maybe is not quite as well known, although I live close to San Francisco, so we've gotten to attend the festivities there. It's really fun. But I just want to go back a little bit because we just have a little time left, but I want to go back to something you had mentioned before, because I know we have a lot of people watching that are authors or maybe aspiring authors, and you mentioned that you never expected to publish. This was just something you were doing for your son. It was just kind of something for the two of you. What made you make the jump from just having that story that when you wrote it out for him to read, and then saying, hey, I should publish this?
Well, I sent it to my sisters who have kids around my son's age, around Brandon's age, and their kids loved it. And I'm like, okay, well, they're, relatives, whatever. But my sisters were read, and they had showed a friend or two. And my sister, I don't remember which sister, maybe both of them, they're like, you should consider publishing. And I just kind of scoffed. I'm like, who wants to read this little story about Brandon? You guys are crazy. And then, I just kind of sat on it. I didn't do anything for a couple years, and then I was still always looking for books like the one I wrote, and I still couldn't find any. And then I'm like, you know what? Brandon was a little bit older. I had a little extra time. I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I should look into it and just try, just see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went ahead and I published it thinking that no one was gonna read it, except for my friends I forced to buy, you know, buy the book, read the book, review the book. But like people I didn't know were buying the book, and I was getting really good feedback. And a lot of people were saying, oh, we love the book. It's so special. And I'm like, whoa, that's, you know, made me feel good. And I'm like, okay, maybe there really is a need for this type of book. And so that's when I started writing these other chapter books. And, you know, I guess I'll keep going because it does seem to fill a niche.
Right.
And it's so fun. It's really fun.
Yeah, and it's so different than what, am I remembering correctly that you're an attorney? So, I mean, this just must be so different. It's like use a whole different part of your brain to be able to do this kind of work.
Right. Because, you know, I never really thought of myself as being that creative because everything was like research writing. That's no problem. Easy for me to do. But the creative stuff, you know, I just never thought I was that way until after I had my son. And then now I'm ending up singing all the time. I would never sing before. I have a horrible voice and make up little stories and being goofy like I'm kind of being right now.
I love it.
Before. Motherhood does to you.
I love it. And I love how, you know, I think becoming a parent really does kind of change the way you see yourself or the things that you can do that maybe you never thought you could do before. That's such a great story. Yeah. And so do you prefer, like, do you find now that, do you think you'll be doing more chapter books or more picture books? Especially as your son is getting older, do you find that like the books that you're writing, like maybe are kind of adjusting to his age, or do you think that you always kind of have a love for doing picture books?
Well, you know, my books were growing with him. So the first one was a picture book, and then there's next chapter book, and then the next little bit more difficult chapter book.
Right.
Now the fiction book, no, the nonfiction book. So I'll probably, right now I'm going to do another nonfiction for the holiday, but I'll probably go back to doing picture books because they're so fun and cute.
Yeah.
I know it's not going to be for him anymore. Now I'm writing for myself.
Right.
So I
was
writing for him before. Now I'm writing for me and for all the other little kids out there. So I'll probably go back to writing picture books again. And, you know, the more we travel, once we can travel to Asia again, when it's safer, I really want to do Taiwan next. That was 2 summers ago. 2 summers ago, we were planning on going to Taiwan. I was going to do Brandon Goes to Taipei. But then COVID hit. And so we just haven't been back. So.
Oh, well, hopefully we'll do that again soon.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for all that you do. And it was so much fun to talk with you and get to hear more about how the inspiration behind your books. And I can't wait to see the new book that's coming out. Hopefully let's see, what would that be? 2023.